Welcome back to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth and not care who doesn't like it. Dr. Mack, I want to bring him back onto the screen. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning. I've got a couple of clips. We're gonna circle back to the reparations conversation as well as the Juneteenth conversation. I just kind of want to get your snap reaction to a couple of clips that we have, if that's okay with you. You have some
Sure,
time for that?
sure,
All
sure.
right, this first clip, I want to start with let's see. I think I want to start with the January 6th commission. It is a little long, so we'll probably stop in the middle of it. But I really want to know your opinion. We're going to watch a little bit of this clip. Um, this what happened on January 6th showed that this country, there's a large portion in this country that is willing to overthrow this country if they do not get their way at the voting booth. So they're basically saying, to hell with democracy. We want democracy only if it works for us. Before I play the clip, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, again, this is the importance, Brother Dixon, of understanding history, because what we saw on January 6th, it happened before, and it happened on a greater, larger scale. And so, we can either talk about it now or we'll watch the clip and then I'll tell you historically when this happened, why it happened. So
Just
January 6th was not an aberration. It has happened before. And it,
January 6th has happened before. I want everyone to keep that in your mind as we take a look at this clip and we come back and discuss the times that January 6th has happened before in this country.
Mhm.
Okay, so the clip is not ready yet. So Professor Dr. Hart, go ahead and tell us before how this has happened in American history, but at a more even bloodier scale.
And when it happened, it specifically targeted African Americans, specifically targeted us. So it goes back to Reconstruction. The presidential election of 1876 was between two men. And keep in mind that we, as Black folks, were members of the Republican Party. We were the party of Lincoln, right? And the Democrats were the slaveholding party. So the election was between Rutherford B. Hayes and Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and Democrat Samuel Tilden. So that election, like all presidential elections, when you're grabbing for power, especially when Black folks are on the uprise, that election got contested. So right here in nation's capital in Washington, D.C., these two men in an unofficial meeting met in a hotel owned by a Black man named James Wormley in D.C. Okay. And they struck a compromise. And that compromise is known as the Compromise of 1877. And so in layman's terms, what happened is this. Tilden said to Hayes, listen, my brother, I'll give you the Oval Office. You can have the White House, but I need something in return. And Hayes says, in an exchange for power, my brother, what is it you would like? Tilden said to Hayes, since the Civil War ended and now all these Black folks are freed, the only reason they're able to do what they want to do and live a somewhat of a fair life is because you got federal troops down there protecting them. No different than when you see wars break out now and we leave troops in Afghanistan or anywhere else to maintain the peace. There were federal troops in the South that was protecting us when we were building schools, when we were getting education, participating in the political process. Federal troops were in the South protecting us. So Tilden said to Hayes, I want you to remove all those federal troops. And Hayes says, so if I pull them out, you're going to give me the Oval Office. Deal. They struck the deal. When they removed those federal troops out, everything that all of you saw on video on January 6th, it played out all over the South. They literally walked in and they told the carpetbaggers, and these are white folks who came from the South to participate in the political process, you got a certain amount of time to get out of here. Some of them they gave warning to, but they literally just walked into offices all over the South and literally started killing Black representatives who were in political positions. Literally everything you saw on January 6th, it played out over the entire South because of the Compromise of 1877, where Rutherford B. Hayes agreed to pull the federal troops out of the South in order to become president.
So we see yet again, and I had not heard of that until you know, and I one thing I appreciate about you is that you're okay with the fact that we don't know that everybody doesn't know this history.
Well, Brother
Um,
Dixon, let me correct you on something. I
mhm,
want folks to understand a little bit, just a little bit about me. I am a mechanical engineer by trade. I graduated from Mississippi State with a mechanical engineering degree. I never studied Black history when I was growing up, and there were implications of that. It was only in my adulthood that I became extremely curious about who I am as a Black man, and I started studying. So I'm not a historian of academic training, but I am a student, and I'm constantly trying to learn. So I absolutely understand why we don't know, and that's why I so appreciate what you're doing on your program to help us to learn about ourselves. And that's why I'm understanding about the issues behind Juneteenth. That's why I so appreciate Roland Martin. I so appreciate the Black press, because you all are our voice to help us to understand. We as a people just have to humble ourselves. And I got to say this before we go on, Brother Dixon. There were a lot of folks who contacted me after the Roland Martin show, and they praised what you did,
mm,
because you did what most of us are afraid to do. You said, look, man, I had no idea what that brother just laid on us. Most of us will not admit that we don't know our history, and we'll make the mistakes. You know, it's just like in classroom when our children don't understand and they're afraid to raise their hand and say, I don't know. That's what you did. And so many people that contacted me, literally everybody who contacted me, that was one of the single points that they pointed out. It's the respect
wow.
that they had for you for acknowledging that, man, I didn't know, and I'm glad that brother helped educate me a little bit. So I just want to say,
Oh
on
wow.
behalf of myself and all of my friends, I appreciate your humility and what you're doing to help us to learn a little bit more about who we are as a people and our experience here.
Oh wow, brother. I appreciate that. No, I there's so much that I don't know that I don't have time to
That
pretend
we don't know.
yeah, I don't have time to pretend like I know it because I could just as easily just listen to somebody who does. Let's take a listen to this clip. This is a clip where they're discussing the January 6th or the January 6th Commission. And I want us to put this in context of everything that you just said about what happened historically in this country,
Mhm,
where January 6th played itself out dozens of times over across the
mhm,
South during Reconstruction. Let's
mhm.
take a look at it, Dave.
The January 6th Commission because this really bothers me. And it's like I said, I was horrified by January 6th. I think what happened was terrible. I still see, if you are a journalist in Washington, I see these CNN correspondents running up and chasing down senators in the hallways, being like, Senator, what about the January 6th Commission? Senator, do you support against January 6th Commission? What about subpoena power whenever it comes to the January 6th Commission? Meanwhile, and we recently covered this, there is a national reckoning around home prices in America.
Okay,
No,
but
yeah,
they're
sorry,
not
go
mutually
ahead.
exclusive,
Well,
right?
but
the
see-
January 6th thing is important.
See, it is important,
And
but
it's-
is it the 6 months later? Is it should be the ruling number
I
one
think-
conversation of
I
a
think
journalist?
it's really important. And one of the reasons why I think it's
Interesting.
important because it highlights the reasons why a guy like Donald Trump is so fucking dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Is because a guy can incite a bunch of morons to do
Yeah.
something really fucking stupid. And now that he's silenced off of social media, and now that, that actually did happen,
Yeah.
once it becomes a thing, it could be like mass shootings, right? They didn't exist, then they did.
Right.
Now they're a thing.
So
that could be a thing again.
If it was a real commission, I would believe you, Joe. But knowing how these things work, I know that this commission would be some sort of bullshit, like the Benghazi report before it, or many of these others. The way that the politics works around it, it will dominate the news cycle. And here's the thing, though. Washington actually is a zero-sum game. Like, when I'm talking about mutual exclusivity, it actually is. Senate floor time is the most precious thing in D.C. So whatever the driving conversation of the D.C. is that day, it is actually detracting from somewhere else because these people take vacations literally every other day. The August recess is coming up, all of this. So when we focus on, look, the presidency is really about 100 days. And after that, you're like running for the midterms. And after that, you're running for re-election. In terms of the last, 75, 80 years of the American presidency, the vast majority of major legislation moves in the first couple of months of the administration. And that's it. You're totally dead. And so for the fact that January 6th continues to dominate American politics, I agree with you. It's completely important. And if it was a real commission, yes. But I know that there are these titanic other issues moving within American politics and that are getting zero attention. Lab leak is actually number one. Maybe somebody should go and ask a Democratic senator whether they believe in the lab leak theory or not. So this is the mutual exclusivity, is because the CNN reporter must ask this because he needs to give his bosses something to air on the nightly news that day, which is part of the editorial agenda. Well, the Fox News reporter has to do the same thing, and it comes together to mask all of these incredibly important issues. So it really is a tragedy because it's like you said, I don't want to downplay Jan 6. I actually think it was terrible, and it does show like the power of a demagogue, like of a charlatan whenever you become president. But whenever we're focusing on that at the expense of everything else, and maybe we should even ask, why are these people all like why are you willing to storm the Capitol for Trump?
I can help you out with that.
Please tell me.
Because they're idiots. There's a lot of idiots. It's very easy to survive.
So, Dr. Mack, I wanted to bring that clip in. That's a clip of Joe Rogan with Crystal Ball, and I forgot the other gentleman's name in the clip, but they're discussing something that is regularly discussed in media critiques, in progressive politics circles, and some right-wing libertarian circles, and it is whether or not we should get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th as opposed to everything else. It's almost as though they're setting up a false choice here in terms of our ability to investigate what happened on January 6th versus our ability to do something good for the people. And in reality, even if we don't investigate January 6th, we're not seeing a whole lot of actual tangible results for the people. I want you to address that in context of how we messed it up in history the last time, because we didn't get the Reconstruction right. We still are dealing with some of the ramifications. Speak about that.
Okay, well, I'm laughing because I don't want to go back to Reconstruction on my answer to this. See, you, me, and everybody that's out there that watched television, we all saw it play out. So I absolutely agree with Rogan when he says, we need a commission. I agree with the other brother that says, what is it going to show us? So I compare this to March 3rd, 1991. And this is from a Black perspective, how I'm telling you what I compare it to. So what happened on March 3rd, 1991? We all sat there and we watched a videotape from a Black man on his balcony of a beating of motorist Rodney King. We watched it all play out. And we as Black folks, we sat back, we said, okay, for one of the first times in our history, we absolutely see what's going on. Okay, you want to go to trial? Fine. But what did that videotape do? It made folks say, I don't believe my lying eyes. So back to January 6th, okay, fine, we could do a commission, but all of us heard what Trump said. All of us heard what the mob, how they digested it. All of us saw what they did. And again, when you storm the United States Capitol, when you're out there talking about death to the vice president, death to these congressmen, this isn't what do you need to know here? What is it that the commission is going to say to us that we all did not see? Now, the one thing that I would say you should have a commission for is because to this day, I need to see accountability on Trump. Trump needs to be held accountable to it. Who was Trump's lawyer? And it's escaping my mind, Brother Dick.
If you hadn't asked me, I could see his
former mayor of New York.
Oh, Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani needs to be held accountable. If there were, so now that I'm asking the questions, okay, fine, I'll go with the commission, because if indeed that there were armed security inside the Capitol who were hugging, as Trump said, and allowing these people to come in, see, they violated their oath, because when you take that oath, you say, I swear to protect against enemies, both foreign and domestic. So if there were security inside the Capitol who conspired and helped these people, all of them need to be held accountable. So from a standpoint of knowing what happened, we don't need a commission for that. But from a standpoint of holding folks accountable, and I'm talking all the way from Trump, Giuliani, all the way to any security guard that conspired with that, if there was information given saying, these are friendlies, let them go, whoever gave those orders. So as I think about it now, Brother Dixon, yeah, a commission should be done, but that commission should be held specifically so that we can hold folks accountable. And when you're talking about holding folks accountable, you're talking about treason here. We're not talking about some misdemeanor.
That's
We're
it.
talking treason.
That's it. That's it. That's the thing, because they've shown us who was I think it might have been Roland, it might have been you. I don't know who said it the other day, but I brought up the fact that that these people are willing to overthrow the country because they lost an election, and somebody made the point that this ain't the first time. They literally started the entire Confederacy because they couldn't get their way, right?
Treason.
Treason. They have been committing treason throughout the history of this country because they cannot get their way. And we are seeing very specifically the clash between white supremacy in this country and their desire to control and dominate this American empire and this American system. And if they don't get their way, or even worse, if black folks actually get power, they'll burn this whole thing to the ground.
Okay, so Brother Dixon, I'm going to keep reiterating over and over again. This is why we need to know our history. And this is why they don't want you to do it with this whole critical race theory thing, right? But this is why we need to know our history, because what you just said, here's another historical example of it. Remember in 1954, right? There was something happened in 1954. There was a famous civil rights landmark case, Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah.
Right? So what did the High Court rule? The High Court basically said that segregation in public education is unconstitutional. You got to open it up. And what did the Southern leaders in the United States Congress did? Have you ever heard of the Southern Manifesto, Brother Dixon?
Yes, yeah.
These cats wrote a manifesto that says, I don't care what you do, but do not integrate public schools in the South. And I am proof positive. My family, I got a picture of my mother, my oldest brother, my 2 aunts, and my first cousins integrating a Jackson Public School, Davis Elementary School, named after former Confederate President Jefferson Davis, 3 years after Brown versus Board of Education. So to your point, and if you study history, whenever black folks are on the rise, racism ramps up.
Yeah.
I'll give you this as an example. The Civil War ends April 9th, 1865. You know what happened in December? Now we get the 13th Amendment, right? When we get that 13th Amendment and they've lost the Civil War, 6 ex-Confederate troops met in Pulaski, Tennessee. They formed a little group called the Ku Klux Klan. Why? Because blacks were on the uprise. In 1868, when the 14th Amendment passed and we got citizenship, they began to ramp it up again. And in 1870, when black men got the right to vote, all of a sudden you start seeing all these voter restrictions, voter suppression efforts, the grandfather clause, literacy tests, black codes, all of these things. So every time when Barack Obama gets elected president, all of a sudden we get this resurgence in law enforcement where let's just shoot and kill any black person we want with immunity, qualified immunity. This happens historically whenever black folks are on the rise. And now Biden selects as his vice presidential running mate a black woman. And what do? And they lose the election. Oh my God, we're not going to do that again. Now we're going to institute voter suppression laws. And as a matter of fact, the election was unfair. Forget what the court said, forget facts and anything else. Now on January 6th, we will overthrow the country. That is a common play throughout history when black folks are on the rise trying to get to equality.
There's so much there. There's so much there. I want to play this next clip. It's a compilation of hysteria around exactly what you're talking about, critical race theory. And then I want us to discuss that African proverb that says that until the lions have historians, the history will always be told by the hunters. Let's take a look at this clip.
Right.
Communists like sameness.
And that is what you're starting to see with critical race theory and other types of things like this with the school boards.
Punctuality? Racist. Ice cream trucks? Super racist. Shakespeare? White supremacy. Bird racism. We must become actively anti-bird. us and me and my identity. Let's talk about me and you've offended me.
Cancel culture, Twitter mob.
I wonder why. It's liberal privilege.
To which I say I've never said a racist thing about Meghan Markle or anybody else.
The pervasiveness of this critical race theory issue,
Anti-American critical race theory.
and some of this racial bullying.
Is our military racist? Is our country inherently racist?
Yes, they are.
I don't know if they meant to answer the question that way at the end, but I mean, there it is. This is just maybe a 45-second clip of the hysteria that goes on all day, every day on every single media outlet, radio station, talk radio, Fox News. All of these outlets are pushing this idea that why are they so afraid of critical race theory?
When you start talking about America's original sin, the inhumanity, again, I want to say the inhumanity of how America was built. That's a shame. That's just far too much for them to take right now, which is why they're trying to stop any kind of study on that. And I want you to understand something. People are going to say, hey, wait a minute. This whole idea of slavery, why are black folks acting like they were the only ones enslaved? Man is enslaved, man, since man's been here. Go back almost 11,000 years. So why are we dealing with this now? Well, I can respect that point, fam. But I want to tell you something that is very unique about American slavery, unlike anything that I know. Now, there may be another example of it. I'm just telling you that I don't know it. So the uniqueness of American slavery that's different from any other form of slavery. And it's not my opinion. All you need to do is go to Article 1, Section 2, Part 3 of the Constitution, and you will see the uniqueness of American slavery different from any other form of slavery. American slavery is the first and only form of slavery that I know that took the slave out of the human equation. What do you mean, Carl? He took him out of the human equation. Article 1, Section 2, Part 3 define African American, those of us enslaved, as 3/5 of a person. And furthermore, because words matter, and I want to apologize to my ancestors for saying this, we should never say slave, because that implies that we were born a slave. We need to always say enslaved, because that reminds us that somebody put us in slavery.
Come on now.
And that's what they don't want you to understand. They don't want you to see the barbarianism of what they did, the nefarious actions of this country in enslaving our ancestors. So again, when you think about American slavery, and they have to take a critical look at it based on race, this is the abomination that they don't want you to understand. Again, here is the hypocrisy of this democracy. This democracy was based on inalienable rights. In layman terms, family, inalienable rights are God-given rights, not rights that man gives you, rights that God give you. So now this country is founded on the principles of inalienable rights, a democracy. And at the very same time that you do it, you're now going to enslave another member of the human race, which is why when you look at the Constitution, you will never see the word slave. That level of hypocrisy, they just realized was just a bit too much, even for the quote unquote founding fathers. You don't even see the word slave in there, yet they talk about us. So that level of hypocrisy, and see, the importance of history is that history helps you to think critically, which is what you and I are doing now. When we look at January 6th, it harkens us back to the Compromise of 1877. We hear about the January 6th Commission and what the fatal flaws could be. It harkens us back to March 3rd, March 3rd, 1991, when we saw the Rodney King situation. There's a videotape, and you don't believe your own lying eyes. We're not going to believe our lying eyes of what we saw and what could potentially come out of it. When we take a look at what happened with Brown versus Board of Education and the Southern Manifesto to say, forget what the highest court in the land says. See, when it plays in their favor, when you go back to the Dred Scott decision, right, of 1857, when you look at that decision, when Chief Justice Roger B. Taney said, when the Constitution was written, the black man had no rights by which the white man had to respect. Oh, they want to adhere to that. They want to adhere to that. Plessy versus Ferguson, they want to adhere to that. But when you start talking about equality, Oh no, we're gonna change the rules. Here's America talking about their capitalistic society and how competitive we are, and we'll compete with the best in the world. But when black folks and other minorities start voting, no, there's too many people voting. We need to change the rules. History is full of that. That is the type of critical thinking that they're most afraid. And as Malcolm X said, Malcolm said this, of all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research, because when you find that you have a problem, all you have to do is study the historical methods of people with problems like yours. And when you find out how they solve theirs, you'll know how to solve yours.
That's it.
They don't want you to know history.
Professor, we have I've already held you a long time, but we still have the reparations conversation a little bit more. We got to dovetail on Juneteenth. I want to take it to the after party because I want to take the filter off. Right now, we're doing the public show. The after party is where we go. We let our hair down. I mean, you can let yours down. I can't let mine down. But we're gonna take 5. David.